in the 1920s and 1930s, there was an immigration policy in America that when you get your citizenship, if a foreign immigrant, you have to demonstrate, basic English and very, very basic knowledge about United States history and self-awareness. So there was this Jew called Moses Weiss. He couldn't for the life of his even understand basic English. So he goes to his friend, let's make up a name, Howard. He says, Howard, I got a problem. I can't understand basic English. So Howard says, no problem. Listen, buddy, it's extremely simple. Every single time, I know what the clerk does. I have connections. I know how it works. They ask 5 questions every time. Same sequence. First question is going to be, what's your name? Second question is, who is the first American president? Third question is, how many kids you have? Fourth question is going to be, how many states there are in America? And fifth question is going to be, which of your parents are alive? So very simple. You don't have to understand the questions, just memorize the answers. All right. So he does that. Moses Weiss, George Washington, right? That's the answer to the second question. I have 5 kids, there are 50 states. Thank God both of my parents are alive. So he remembers just the answers. Happens to be, he goes to the process to get his citizenship, and the guy asks him, the clerk switched the order, and he said, first question was, what's the name of the first American president? So he says, Moses Weiss. And then he says, what's your name? He says, George Washington. The sequence was switched. And then instead of asking him how many kids he had, he said, how many states are there? So he goes, 5. He says, how many kids do you have? He goes, 50. And the clerk looks at him and he says, who's crazy, me or you? And he goes, thank God both. And it's a funny story and it's a cute story. And it may or may have not happened. But the point is, that's what goes wrong in marriages. And I'm going to focus 3 more lessons on the difference between character and technique. A lot of guys use techniques to fix a marriage. Now, just to simplify this video, we're not going to start getting into techniques, but we're going to label, let's say there's 75 great techniques. Ways how to listen, how to talk, how to think, how to approach, how to get through her wall around your wife's heart. A bunch of different ways. Let's just number them 1 through 75. All right. The problem is guys remember techniques. They process techniques, but they're not reading the sequences. They don't read the emotional sequence of what's going on in their wife's heart. So all they're seeing is like disrespect, criticism, bitterness, revenge, anger, lack of trust, but they're not reading what's going on in her heart. They don't see the underlying personality or character that's coming out, and they're responding with a sequence which theoretically makes sense, but since the emotional sequence is different, it's messing up. Another way of looking at it is this way. Let's say your abilities as a husband is 95%. You're 95% to 100% skills in how you show up as a husband. You can then use all these 75 skills because your ability is at 95%. But if you suck, excuse me for saying it, if you suck at being a husband, and for a variety of reasons, could be your father wasn't the role model, could be you don't have confidence, could be you have confidence, but you have no compassion, you don't have emotional awareness, you can't read her internal emotional GPS. Doesn't matter why, I'm not judging you. But let's say your skills are at 5 or 10%, you can't use those 75 techniques, even if you understand them, because it's going to be incongruent. She's going to pick up that it's not a reflection of you. She'll pick up, oh, you're manipulating me, you're using something on me, you read a book, you read a technique. So your skills, you might be able to use skill 13 and 21, but you can't use all 75. When your skills as a husband go to 20%, you can now use skills 25 through 30 to 35. Does that make sense? Do you follow what I'm saying? There's a difference in your ability to implement the very same techniques. So that's another area where guys go wrong. Because again, they're not aware. First of all, they're not reading her correctly. And number 2, they're not reading their own internal character correctly. Which brings me to the third part where they apply this incorrectly. Some guys will say, we'll use techniques to build character, which means they'll say, okay, I'm working on forgiveness. I'm working on compassion. I'm working on anger management. And they'll use certain techniques to build it, but they're not building them. They're just faking it. Now, sometimes they are building it, but sometimes they're faking it. And what happens is, again, there's incongruency. There's a frustration. They then feel, I'm working on forgiveness, but they're thinking forgiveness. They don't actually experience forgiveness. Because, for example, When you experience forgiveness, there's an energy in your heart. There's a love, there's a flow, there's a confidence. You feel really, really good about yourself when you experience it. If you fake forgiveness, you might think, I am forgiving. I want to forgive. I know God is forgiving and so I want to be like that, but you're not experiencing it. And the mistake over there again is you're using certain techniques to implement things which are character, like they make sense. Like things, forgiveness is a character, it's not a technique. Patience is a character, love is character. Anger control, confidence, all these are character developments. But if you use techniques to build them and they're just faking it, it's not changing who you are. And again, that leaves another frustration. So again, it's like the guy thinking, oh, I know the 5 answers. Well, dude, the guy switched the question. Now you sound like a fool.